think you ought to be aware of that Tammy and I were fortunate to spend a lot of time with David at work, since he worked for us, and also at our lake house. And we just had a lot of fond memories, and a lot of those memories you kids aren't aware of on how your father really felt about you. He had his issues, we all know that, but David loved you, and he didn't very often talk much about you, but he had those moments when he was sincere, and he missed you kids and missed being in your life. That being said, there's Laura. God bless you to stand behind our brother for all those years. We played Scrabble at the lake house quite a bit, and most of you know that the Hamiltons, they like to cheat. David, his way of cheating was taking time. And it got so bad at the lake that Tammy and I, we went out and bought a 3-minute timer. And told David, you got 3 minutes to get your word, brother, or you're done. And he would sit there and connive with Laura to put a word down because she sat next to him, so they would always try to beat us. You remember that, Laura? Remember that? Are you guys trying to yeah. But, nevertheless, I wanted to say to you kids that your dad loves you. And I miss him. But you kids need to know how he really felt deep down. He had a lot of regrets in his day that he didn't have the time to spend with you. So, that being said, he loved you.
It's sad, I'm not gonna cry. David was so much older than us, we really didn't know him as well as maybe you think we did, because he was so much older. And so one experience I remember David had was he had a Cushman scooter that he bought, and he painted it, had it all painted up, had a nice leather seat he put on it and tacked it in, and he wrecked it in the front of my neighbor's house. And I'll never ever forget that, but he took me to Vandalia, which was about a 35-minute drive, and going down the interstate with him was really cool. And I can remember when he went off to college, and my mom and dad got him a motorcycle. Steve, remember that? I got to make you mad, but I'm 50. Yeah. And he got on the mountains, and it started to snow or rain, and he threw his bike in the back of a bus and took him to Utah after that. But again, I know David misses everybody. I miss him. We all miss him. So that's it.
Okay, so when Doug talks about distance, I was in 2nd grade when David ran off to college. And, I have one real vivid memory of the house we lived in on Richmore. My mom and dad were gone for the day. And it was in the middle of winter, and it's a story-and-a-half house, and we had lots of snow. And like, I'm 5 years old, max, and the boys, the older boys, they decided it'd be fun to go open the window on the 2nd floor and jump down into the snowdrift. Well, if you know David and Steve and Greg and Doug very well, you know they couldn't leave well enough alone. So then they decided it'd be fun to take me up there and throw me out the window into the snowdrift. It was only about, I don't know, 15, 20 feet, and the snowdrift was one of those memories I have of David. I echo what Greg said, about David and how he felt about his children and whatnot. David had a kind heart. David was always supportive. David might not understand what you were doing or question, but he was always supportive of me and the choices I made in my walks in life, and was really a good example and really a great older brother. And I will miss him. I will miss the conversations I had with him. You could talk to David. He's one of the few people you'd ever run into that you could talk about politics or religion and all the things you aren't allowed to talk about, and it never got heated, and it never got judgmental. He would always validate your thoughts and take that into consideration. It was never his way was the right way, and you're wrong, and I'm right, and I've got to convince you. And I've not met many people in my life, who thought that way and acted that way. And I'm grateful that he was my older brother. I'm grateful for the things that he taught me along the way. And I know he is quite proud today to see this gathering and to see his kids and grandchildren here. He's got a big smile on his face.
A unique relationship with David in that I guess I was 4 years old or 3 or 4 years old when he left. So didn't know him real well. I mean, he was raised and out of sight, out of mind. He was, on the West Coast. I was living in Ohio and everything. And then he and his family moved back to Dayton and got to know him. And some of the things that I remember, because I guess I could have been his own child. We had so many people. I mean, I was the 6th boy in a row. And when I was born, the doctor actually apologized to her mom. He said, Mrs. Hamilton, I'm sorry, it's another boy. But the thing is,
She said, pull him out and I'll take him home anyway.
but my memories of David is when he came back, I can remember, and I was probably, I don't know, must have been 10, 12 years old. But David got into magic, and he was doing that with his balloons. And David was naturally intelligent. He was brilliant in so many ways, and he might have been so naturally blessed to his detriment, I think, maybe sometimes. But I can remember him getting into magic and taking me to a magic circle meeting, which is when a bunch of professional magicians get together, do tricks. Then we went back and somebody had introduced a trick. Then we went to all these stores and bought all this stuff to make the trick. I can remember he worked for Wrigley, the Wrigley Corporation. And I'm not a gum chewer, but I'm telling you, he worked for Wrigley. You chewed gum until you were tired of chewing gum. And I mean, he always had all these big boxes of gum. It was unbelievable. But then as he got older, one of the things I remember, as I was older and I was married and had children, he was still living in Vandalia at the time, so he was older. And he was doing his, he made his living twisting balloons and being an MC. He and a friend of his, Phil would make arrangements and he would go to state fairs throughout the country to be an MC and twist balloons. And that's what that little red balloon back there is just kind of, and he was gifted there too. But I can remember when he lived there, one of the unique things about him is he was older. And when computers came in, he dove right in. I was very, I enjoyed computers too, but I can remember going over to where he lived and he'd have his computer set up, man, and he was into this hardcore. He was in programming databases and doing all this stuff. And it was just fascinating for me to see an older guy embrace that technology. And David did that. As I visited with David, we had, because I worked and where I worked, the company I worked for, we did a lot of entertaining. So anytime I went and saw David, I'd take him to lunch. He was a customer that day. And so we had lots of deep discussions. And many times he got into things and was just brutally honest about some things. And one of the things I know that a couple of my predecessors, Kirk and Greg, mentioned David's love for his children. As I talked to David, he had lots of regrets in life. He had some things that he loved in life. But one of his regrets was that he wasn't a better father. And I talked to Kirk and Cammie earlier. David really didn't understand how to be a father. You know, if you look at his life and his life pre-Laura, he was traveling all the time. He was always alone. There was nobody around. His family wasn't around. He'd come back and check in for a few weeks and he'd take off again. And that's just the way it was. That's the way life was. And one of his true regrets was that he wished if he could go back and be a better father. And he didn't know how to do that because his lifestyle that he had chosen kind of took him down a different road. And that saddened him. And when I talked to him on these things, we'd get into some serious discussions. And this wasn't a one-time or a two-time thing. This went on literally for years. That as we talked and visited. And that was one of his greatest regrets in life. And he mentioned that he would like to go back and live it again. And then a great blessing happened in his life. When he came here to Florida, he finally got off the road, began to have a more normal life. Laura drops in. and I think those last years with Laura were the brightest of his life because he had a normal life finally. He had a normal life with Laura. He wasn't out traveling and gone all the time. He developed a relationship with her. I think he tried in the best way that he knew how to reach out to you of his children at that time. But he really began to change. And Laura was a great strength and support to David. And I know how much he loved Laura, and I also know how much Laura loved David. And he was a great brother. And I'm grateful that I got to be his brother and got to know him.
6 of the boys. So now you get to myself, number 7, and then Pam, the baby. So I just want to share something that David taught me, something that I learned from him. And as you've heard from the others, you know, it was a little bit different because of our ages and things. And I don't even know how old I was when I was born. He was 15 when I was born, because I was born in 16. But anyway, one of the times when he came back to Ohio to live, and he was at Mom and Dad's, and he was looking for a job. And we were talking, and he said, well, he was going to apply for this job at Springfield Leather, which was like a leather works for making billfolds and purses and belts and things like that. He said, come on. I said, where are we going? He says, we're going to the library, to the Warder Public Library. And I went with him, and he got all these books about leatherworking and about machines, because I think he was applying to be the manager or the assistant manager, not like a line worker or something. You know, he was going to get anyway. And so I said, you know, being a kid, you don't know anything about that. He says, well, I'm going to learn. He said, you know, when you write a application, he said, like, if I was going to go get a job at the Pizza Hut, I remember him saying, I would write everything I knew about pizza, and I would learn everything I knew about pizza, and I would apply that. And I'd go in there, and I'd be the best pizza manager that I could be. So anyway, long story short, you know what happened, right? He read all those books, did that, and he went in there and he got that job. So I was influenced at a young age by my older brother and learning a lesson that, you know, when you want something, you're willing to work for it hard and learn and apply yourself, you can accomplish it. So that's a message that I've never forgotten, and I'll always carry, a message that my big brother and a lesson that he taught me. And I love him. That makes me a little emotional. Doug said he's not going to cry. I would cry. But, you know, Pam and I were fortunate to be able to spend some time with Laura and with David, and I'm glad. I'm glad for that time that we had. You know, the memories that we made of, you know, when you're comforting somebody, and especially the last memory of, I was holding his hand, and I started, because I remember when our mom passed, music comforted her very much. And so we were talking to him and holding his hand, and I started to sing a song that he would have remembered from his childhood and from our home, that was, there is beauty all around when there's love at home. And we started to hum and sing that. And you know, David started to sing with us. And I'm not saying that he just hummed. He sang robustly. And I just want you to know that those are great memories, and I love him, and I'm so grateful that we're all connected as family and friends.
My mind. David came back from the West Coast, and he came and they moved in with us, the kids that were there, and our mother and father, and Cammy and Kurt and Mari moved in.
Screwed up my only chance to have a room by myself. Finally gonna get a room, and here they came.
Right, we were talking about doing this chronologically, and I'm sitting over here biting my thumbnails because I gotta step on Pam's toes one more time. Okay?
You're not a sibling.
I understand that. This is why you almost got it until Randy stood up.
Ah, sibling line. Sibling line.
Well, but what happened is when they came back, because we had such a large family, we weren't rich, we weren't poor, we had sufficient of everything. But I remember David went out, and he did two things. I'll get into another one too. But he bought gallons of orange juice and put them in the refrigerator and said that he was older, he wasn't a kid now, and he wasn't going to be limited on the amount of orange juice that he drank. And that he could drink all the orange juice he went. That's a true story. And then one Christmas, our mother loved chocolate milk. David goes out and gets a case of number 10 cans of Hershey's chocolate syrup. And that's what he gave her for Christmas. So he was very creative.
And David, oh my, I don't know, Randy. You and I seem to, you know an awful lot about David. You talk longer than the rest of the boys. So yeah, I'm number 8. I was an aunt twice before I was born. My mother decided that she needed to have another one while David's first wife was pregnant with Kurt.
Nope.
So.
Oh, yeah. Very fun. Come on,
Is there another Kurt?
Kurt,
I don't know.
you know he's a trick baby. Trick baby.
You know, so there was 20 years between David and myself. So most people my age that I work with, you know, are going through this with their parents, and we've already been through it with our parents. And David, through the many years, I can tell you, has totally loved me unconditionally. There have been no conditions on his love to me or to any of you. And through the ups and downs, he would always pop back with a smile. I lived not too far from him for about a year and a half, when I was 18 to 20 years old. I've got lots of memories with him, so in a way, I was really close with David for being 20 years apart. He would call, we would talk, we would have lunch. But he called me up, so to start this one first, he called me up in the fall, and we were talking, and he was having some issues, and he kept talking about being a father. You know, that he wished that he had done things differently. He wished that he had, you know, time to go back. And I said, well, David, you need to hang up the phone because you can't go back. But you can begin today and make a new end. It's the things that we do today that matter. We don't need to pull all the past forward with us because we get stuck in the mud. We don't go forward. We've all made mistakes. None of us sitting in this room are perfect. But it took David a long time to realize you don't get any do-overs when you're raising your children. You just don't. You get one opportunity and one opportunity only. But that does not negate his love for you all, because he loved you all more than anything. And we would talk, we would have lunch, he would come see me, it's just amazing that he's 20 years older than me and I have this bond with him. Because maybe we went down some different roads, he went down this road, I went down that road, but at the end of the day, we're siblings, we're family, we love, just like all of us have learned to love, unconditionally. I can tell you some stories. He was definitely a man that I have sat in a bar with 20 years difference between us. He took me to Gibsonton to the karting place where they buy all the stuff for all the carnivals. It's just been an interesting experience. But anything David touched, David could conquer. He had magic in his fingers, from doing balloons to doing magic to modeling. It's just crazy. So we were all blessed, and I know that I was really blessed to have him as an older brother. I'm blessed to have all of them, they don't tell all about that. Their heads, they won't ever get out the door. We were very fortunate in a family so big to remain so close that Mom and Dad created an atmosphere that David was safe. But I have to tell you this, and then I'm gonna close. When David was in hospice, Becky talked about singing. First of all, that was not the only song that she sang to him, for starters. So, once the others,
Maybe some of them remember.
99 bottles of beer on the wall.
No, tell them what it was.
No, you go for
Some
it.
of them might remember it. Our grandpa Neville used to sing this song, I don't care if it rains or freezes, as long as I got my plastic cheese sitting on the dashboard of my car.
And let me tell you.
He sang that with us too.
Let me tell you, I don't know if we got that one on video, but that man was taking some deep, deep breaths, and his chest would just go out, he'd get really, it was crazy, it was crazy. I was like, we didn't plan to spend as long as we did with him that day, but he just like came to life that day. But having seen him outside the fence at rehab, and then in hospice, I've told Laura over and over again, David waited a long time to find you, Laura. He searched for years, he searched the world. I think you guys just kept searching. But the love that I saw between David and Laura was just like my mother and father had between them. And it's a love that's unconditional, because Laura, let's be quite honest, she's had to go through some hell with David at times, and she made it. But when I watched David singing to her, holding her hand and kissing her hand, and Laura would look at me and go, I love him to pieces, Pam. That was Earl and Mary Ruth right there, if I'd ever seen it. So through all of this, Laura, you've got our memories, you've got our love. It's unconditional. Once in this family, you don't get to bow out. Sorry, we don't allow it. So we're here with you, and I'm just so thankful and grateful that David had you and that we all have you as part of our family. I love you.
The oldest sibling here, right?
I'm Neville Kirk. I don't know why my family decided to call me Kirk. I have my uncle Kirk. But you know how hard it is to grow up being little Kirk? Always. Little Kirk.
Still.
Still.
In more ways than one, it looks like.
Well, I've been
He's a
working
little
on it.
skinnier than
But
you.
I'm working on it. It comes with age.
Yeah, work on this too then.
Well, you know, I mean, a few heads they cover with hair. You know, but anyway, speaking about hard act to follow, so is my dad. Very extremely hard act to follow. I did my best job for probably 30, 40 years. In the last 20, he changed quite a bit. Growing up, he wasn't fair. Shoot, I grew up with Pam and I going to the same school.
Yeah, I didn't tell my story about you.
Yes,
You just better watch it.
I'll behave.
Get that microphone back.
I'll behave. I probably.
Now, when the principal pulls me aside.
Yes, I know. She was a star at Hamilton. I was one included just as a test for.
Super glue, no less.
Oh, yeah, really good. When they pulled it up, and my dad really can fix stuff, and I inherited that, because when they pulled that desk up, I was holding the concrete came with it. Okay, but being a hard act to follow, but sidetracked me later. The one thing that I learned from that man is that he told me the definition to insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting different results. Until about 20 years ago, I really, really did not want to walk in that man's footsteps. I tried to stay away from it. I didn't want to twist balloons, but by golly, I can do it anytime I want. We grew up learning that, and his good way of talking to people. And I remember a wonderful man, even though I didn't want to be like him. He was never home. But somehow we all grew up pretty decent. And I was blessed with the last 20 years of being able to form an honest father-son relationship with him. I don't miss him very much. The only thing I want left in life is to have the strength that he showed at the end. And when he met Laura, yeah, you're stuck with family. I believe that he found true happiness. And from my perspective, she is a combination of every life he had.
Only the good parts.
In her beauty, in her beauty, in her attitude, in everything that she is. And I believe it was through her that he gained the strength and he gained the ability to see what mistakes he made and decided to change them and reached out to the kids. And the last really good thought and really good time that I had with Dad, because we were happy out here, we were fishing for bass about a year ago. I chose not to come down while he was in hospice because those memories don't want. And with that, all I want to do is be like you. Well, I can fix about anything, and I can talk to anybody.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Oh, yeah, you are.
No, it's
And
right.
we've been teasing. We've been teasing.
I'm gonna put my mom out a little bit. I'm Dustin. I'm my mom's oldest son.
He's my good son.
Well, okay, we're all just in different places. Okay. Grandpa David, I didn't really have a relationship with him, but I was lucky enough to get to meet him. He came into Washington and then came down here when we tried to take my daughter back at one point. And what I can remember was he was always happy. You know, you walk in the room, he'd smile at you. You know, and we'd talk on Facebook all the time. And he knew where I was at. I was always traveling, being in the military. But he'd always send me a message on Facebook. I'd be having a horrible day, and he would send me a message. It might be to ask about body armor or firearms, but you know, it was just something, you know, and it meant a lot to me. I know that seeing him a couple months ago meant a lot, and I think it means a lot to my mom too. And to hear his brothers and sisters say how much he loved his children, I think that means so much to her, because sometimes you just don't know it. You know, I just got to meet my biological father 3 years ago, and I think, you know, I'm getting lucky, you know, and I think that's a blessing that you're having right now, and I'm glad we're here. So, who's next?
I talked to
My favorite memory from Grandpa Hamilton was when he came over for Christmas to Ohio. Kind of creeped me out, standing in the hallway, peering down while I'm like young. I don't even remember how old. And he's peering down on us, and we're just looking up like, huh, he's kind of a scary man. And we're walking past our rooms. And he had us play a game, and I thought it was awesome. It was called Candy Cane Fishing, and we put a whole bunch of candy canes on a kitchen table, and we take another one, put it in our mouth, and scoop as many candy canes as we could out of them. And Pablo said the winner of who got the most candy canes would get a prize. So Miley and I and Ashton, still in Ohio, played, and I don't remember who won, but Grandpa came out and gave us huge old candy cane, like biggest thing ever, and we all thought it was the best thing. And the other two, I don't remember who originally won, but the other two were pretty disappointed that we didn't get a huge old candy cane. And then he came out with 2 more, so we all 3 got the hugest candy cane ever, and we were all so happy. And just seeing the smile on his face when we were playing, it was the best thing ever. And during this whole COVID thing, and we don't really travel down here a lot, calling him on Facebook every now and again, it was funny. He couldn't hear us, so we'd have him on FaceTime, and he'd put his phone to the ear, and we'd have the best view of his ear. It was a good looking
That was the
ear,
best
but-
part of him, his ears.
I love him this terribly. He was a great grandfather.
David and Uncle Greg were bachelors at the time. They had an RV, and so they load up Katie and Tyler, and sometimes they take me and my brother Ryan, and sometimes Michael was there. And they take us to campgrounds, and we spend some weeks in the summer, and we all just kind of hang out. But one time we went to a water park. We were all so excited, and Michael was there, and me and Tyler and Katie, and we're putting our sunscreen on, and Uncle David comes out in the smallest black Speedo I've ever seen. Covered head to toe, it was just white from sunscreen. And he's like, who's ready to go on a water slide? And we all ducked and we ran. We're like, but he was always so much fun when we were on those little trips. He was the life of the party. We always had a good time. So, it just makes me chuckle when I think about it.
Oldest son, I'm the oldest of 5 as well. So a couple memories of Uncle David. He was on the circus and the carnival tour. He would come to Florida. We'd get excited because one of the perks is he'd get us tickets, so we're all excited. We'd go to the fair, either Sarasota County, Charlotte County, even down in Naples. We'd go watch him perform. And I always remembered his big handlebar mustache. And just, he was always had a really outgoing personality. Just, felt like you've known him forever. So there was a little gap in time, hadn't seen him a whole lot, but then we started doing our annual Hamilton reunion at Red Top Mountain in Georgia. The first year was a little rough because we really didn't have it down to a science yet. Some of us stayed in the lodge, some of us stayed in tents. But he was the one who was all about teaching us how to build campfires, and then we'd go out riding pine trees. He would teach us kids to climb up to the top of the tree and hold on. We'd ride it all the way down, and we spent hours and hours and hours doing that. And he was one of the driving forces, I think, on kind of getting us together. It was always funny because, Uncle David was always bringing Susan and Michael, but you didn't know who his companion was going to be at some of these activities. And I remember he brought this crazy Italian lady one year. And her hair was as bright as Susan and Steve's shirt. Bright orange, crazy hair. And it was always amusing to see who Uncle David was going to bring as a date. So, long story short, as everyone's already mentioned, we love Laura. Met Laura. Laura was the best thing that ever happened to David. Once he finally settled down and relocated here to Florida, a couple quick things. If you didn't know, David Laura's condo burnt down. I don't think David had anything to do with that, did he? No. Okay. I work for a neighboring fire department where this happened. It happened in Iona McGregor's fire department over off Winkler. And I got to talk to some of the guys who were there for that fire because the whole building pretty much burned down. They said, we ran across this guy, and after they started explaining who it was, I'm like, that's my Uncle David. They're like, he had like the greatest attitude. He's like, yeah, these things happen. We're just going to pack up and start all over again. My place just burned down. Yeah, that's probably not the attitude that I would have had. And then, so towards the end, they both retired, and they're traveling, they're camping, their RV, and David called me one night, like 9 o'clock, kind of in a panic. And one of their neighbors at the campground who was on oxygen was having some trouble getting the regulator swapped out. And he's like, well, what do I need to do? So kind of walked him through it. My wife's a respiratory therapist, so we kind of told him what you need to do to get the O-ring on there. And he's like, you know what, Jake? That fixed the problem. I feel very, very accomplished right now. I saved that guy's life. Okay, sure. So, and then the last little bit, we were talking RV stuff. We've gotten into camping a little bit and helping him move some stuff as they were traveling around. And all in all, anytime we were there, that was his happy place, to be in the campground with Laura. He just seemed at peace. He seemed happy. And we're definitely going to miss him. So, pass this on to whoever on to next. Anybody?
I tell you what, this is a turnout. I thank you all for showing up. Well, what can I say? It was a rough road. really rough. But it's been a beautiful journey. You know, we've had our ups and downs and turnarounds, and poor Tammy, she had her ears burning all the time. Tammy, what do I do? And you know, the disease that went through David, Lewy body dementia, I can look back and say 10 years ago, I thought it was maybe his bipolar. It was Lewy body. His falling down was Lewy body. And Lewy body does not care about a thing. It ate him. And yeah, the day at hospice, Becky and Pam had been there before me. And I was kind of like, oh, I get an extra hour of relief, you know. And I walk in and they're singing away, and that silly song about the plastic thing in the car and the chimney. Oh my God, and David, they called it rallying. He was rallying. He was giving his last love to Pam and Becky. And you. Well, but I tell you, he's 21 years, you know, and we were always together. And the kids, I thank you guys, it's been so nice. I mean, I was so excited that I took David on a trip to Seattle for his 60th birthday.
We about gave him a heart attack.
And it was a surprise. Now, you try to go through an airline now and say you're doing a surprise. You can't do it. But they came and they wanted the bags and they said, where are you going? And I said, I can't tell you. and so the guy was like, what? And I go, here. Because I didn't want David to know. So we got the tickets and we walked through and we got on the plane. And I was like this, where it said going to Houston then to Seattle. And he got on the plane. And then we got to Houston, and I said, do you want to know where you're going? He says, yeah. I said, okay, we're going to Seattle. Oh, he didn't want to go. He was afraid to see his kids. And I said, too bad, buddy, we are going. Yeah. So, and I had, with Tammy and Mari, we arranged everything, that the hotel and where we were gonna have his luncheon, and P.F. Chang's, wasn't it?
Yep.
P.F. Chang's in Seattle. And we just had a wonderful time. And we had so much of a wonderful time that we stayed an extra 2 days. It was Thanksgiving. And we stayed with his daughter Mari, and enjoyed our time with her. But, you know what, I gotta tell y'all, really, get your ducks in a row. Get your ducks in a row. If you don't have a will, you don't have joint, oh, I'm going through crazy stuff. I am, you know. But I love him. And yeah, I miss him. And I yell at him. I do. He's in the bedroom over there. And I go, why did you do it? I was supposed to go first. And I just, he's just, I get so mad at him. But it will be nice that once this is all over, I'll start. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but you know, I'm gonna get around. And I even thought about doing some camping myself, you know, because we knew a lot of the volunteers at the state parks, and so and we stayed friends with them, and so I keep in touch with them, and I'll just ask them, hey, tell me what number you're on, and I'm gonna pull my Cadillac, put down the seats, and I'll go. I am. I just don't wanna sleep on the ground though. But, and sis, we love you. I'm so glad my sister moved down to Florida. Oh, boy. She's been a lifesaver. She took David to a lot of doctor appointments and pinched his butt and put him in the car. Oh. But most of all, I really want to thank everybody for showing up. My good boss, my best friend at work, my poor son, but all you nieces and nephews, David loved you. And the kids, he really did. He loved you, but didn't know how to tell you. I love you all. Thank you for coming, and are we ready?